Buddhism is a religion and dharma that encompasses a variety of traditions, beliefs and spiritual practices largely based on teachings attributed to the Buddha. Buddhism originated in India, from where it spread through much of Asia, whereafter it declined in India during the Middle Ages. Two major extant branches of Buddhism are generally recognized by scholars: Theravada and Mahayana. Buddhist schools vary on the exact nature of the path to liberation, the importance and canonicity of various teachings and scriptures, and especially the respective practices. Practices of Buddhism include refuge, samatha, vipassana, the Mahayana practice of bodhisattva, and the Vajrayana practices of generation stage and completion stage. In Theravada, the ultimate goal is the attainment of the sublime state of nirvana, achieved by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, thus escaping what is seen as a cycle of suffering and rebirth. Theravada has a widespread following in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. Mahayana, which includes the traditions of Pure Land, Zen, Nichiren Buddhism, Shingon and Tiantai, is found throughout East Asia. Rather than nirvana, Mahayana instead aspires to Buddhahood via the Bodhisattva path, a state wherein one remains in the cycle of rebirth to help other beings reach awakening. The Vajrayana, a body of teachings attributed to Indian siddhas, may be viewed as a third branch or merely a part of Mahayana. Tibetan Buddhism, which preserves the Vajrayana teachings of 8th century India, is practiced in regions surrounding the Himalayas, Mongolia and Kalmykia. Tibetan Buddhism aspires to Buddhahood, a rainbow body. Buddhists number between an estimated 488 million and 535 million, making it one of the world's major religions. Life of the Buddha. Buddhism is an Indian religion attributed to the teachings of Buddha. The details of Buddha's life are mentioned in many early Buddhist texts but are inconsistent. His social background and life details are difficult to prove, the precise dates uncertain. The evidence of the early texts suggests that he was born as Siddhartha Gautama in Kapilavatthu, a town in the plains region of modern Nepal, India border, and that he spent his life in what is now modern Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. Some hagiographic legends state that his father was a king named Suddhodana, his mother Queen Maya, and he was born in Lumbini Gardens. However, scholars such as Richard Gumbrick consider this a dubious claim because a combination of evidence suggests he was born in the Shakyas community, one that later gave him the title Shakyamuni, and the Shakya community was governed by a small oligarchy, a republic-like council where there were no ranks but where seniority mattered instead. Some of the stories about Buddha, his life, his teachings, and claims about the society he grew up in may have been invented and interpolated at a later time into the Buddhist texts. Early Buddhist canonical texts and early biographies of Buddha state that Gautama studied under Vedic teachers, such as Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta, learning meditation and ancient philosophies, particularly the concept of nothingness, emptiness, for the former, and what is neither seen nor unseen, from the latter. Buddha was moved by the innate suffering of humanity. He meditated on this alone for an extended period of time, in various ways including asceticism, on the nature of suffering and means to overcome suffering. He famously sat in meditation under a ficus religiosa tree now called the Bodhi tree in the town of Bodh in Gangetic Plains region of South Asia. He reached enlightenment, discovering what Buddhists call the middle way, a path of spiritual practice to end suffering from rebirths in samsara. As an enlightened being, he attracted followers and founded a sangha. Now, as the Buddha, he spent the rest of his life teaching the dharma he had discovered, and died at the age of 80 in Kushinagar, India. Buddha's teachings were propagated by his followers, which in the last centuries of the first millennium BCE became over 18 Buddhist sub-schools of thought, each with its own basket of texts containing different interpretations and authentic teachings of the Buddha. These over time evolved into many traditions, of which the more well-known and widespread in the modern era are Theravada, Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism. Buddhist concepts. Dukkha is a central concept of Buddhism and part of its Four Noble Truths doctrine, and a central characteristic of life in this world. It can be translated as incapable of satisfying, the unsatisfactory nature and the general insecurity of all conditioned phenomena, painful. Dukkha is most commonly translated as suffering, which is an incorrect translation, since it refers not to literal suffering, but to the ultimately unsatisfactory nature of temporary states and things, including pleasant but temporary experiences. The Four Truths express the basic orientation of Buddhism. We crave and cling to impermanent states and things, which is dukkha, incapable of satisfying and painful. This keeps us caught in samsara, the endless cycle of repeated rebirth, dukkha, and dying again. But there is a way to liberation from this endless cycle to the state of nirvana, namely following the Noble Eightfold Path. The truth of dukkha is the basic insight that life in this mundane world, with its clinging and craving to impermanent states and things, is dukkha and unsatisfactory. We expect happiness from states and things which are impermanent, and therefore cannot attain real happiness. Dukkha arises when we crave and cling to these changing phenomena. The clinging and craving produces karma, which ties us to samsara, the round of death and rebirth. Craving includes kama tanha, craving for sense pleasures, bhava tanha, craving to continue the cycle of life and death, including rebirth, and vibhava tanha, craving to not experience the world and painful feelings. Dukkha ceases or can be confined when craving and clinging cease or are confined. This also means that no more karma is being produced, and rebirth ends. Cessation is nirvana, blowing out, and peace of mind. By following the Buddhist path to moksha, liberation, one starts to disengage from craving and clinging to impermanent states and things. The term path is usually taken to mean the Noble Eightfold Path, but other versions of the path can also be found in the Nikayas. The Theravada tradition regards insight into the Four Truths as liberating in itself. In Buddhism, dukkha is one of the three marks of existence, along with impermanence and anatta. Buddhism, like other major Indian religions, asserts that everything is impermanent but, unlike them, also asserts that there is no permanent self or soul in living beings. The ignorance or misperception that anything is permanent or that there is self in any being is considered a wrong understanding, and the primary source of clinging and dukkha. Rebirth. Samsara. Samsara means wandering or world with the connotation of cyclic, circuitous change. It refers to the theory of rebirth and cyclicality of all life, matter, existence, a fundamental assumption of Buddhism. As with all major Indian religions, samsara in Buddhism is considered to be dukkha, unsatisfactory and painful, perpetuated by desire and avidya, and the resulting karma. The theory of rebirths, and realms in which these rebirths can occur, is extensively developed in Buddhism, in particular Tibetan Buddhism with its Wheel of Existence doctrine. Liberation from this cycle of existence, nirvana, has been the foundation and the most important historical justification of Buddhism. The later Buddhist texts assert that rebirth can occur in 6 realms of existence, namely 3 good realms and 3 evil realms. Samsara ends if a person attains nirvana, the blowing out of the desires and the gaining of true insight into impermanence and non-self reality. Rebirth Rebirth refers to a process whereby beings go through a succession of lifetimes as one of many possible forms of sentient life, each running from conception to death. In Buddhist thought, this rebirth does not involve any soul, because of its doctrine of anatta, which rejects the concepts of a permanent self or an unchanging, eternal soul, as it is called in Hinduism and Christianity. According to Buddhism, there ultimately is no such thing as a self in any being or any essence in anything. The Buddhist traditions have traditionally disagreed on what is it in a person that is reborn, as well as how quickly the rebirth occurs after each death. Some Buddhist traditions assert that no-self doctrine means that there is no perduring self, but there is avasya self which migrates from one life to another. The majority of Buddhist traditions, in contrast, assert that vijnana, though evolving, exists as a continuum and is the mechanistic basis of what undergoes rebirth, rebecoming and rebirth. The rebirth depends on the merit or demerit gained by one's karma, as well as those accrued on one's behalf by a family member. Each rebirth takes place within one of 5 realms according to Theravadans, or 6 according to other schools: heavenly, demigods, humans, animals, hungry ghosts and hellish. In East Asian and Tibetan Buddhism, rebirth is not instantaneous, and there is an intermediate state between one life and the next. The orthodox Theravada position rejects the weight and asserts that rebirth of a being is immediate. However, there are passages in the Samyutta Nikaya of the Pali Canon that seem to lend support to the idea that the Buddha taught of an intermediate stage between one life and the next. Karma in Buddhism. Karma drives samsara, the endless cycle of suffering and rebirth for each being. Good, skillful deeds and bad, unskillful deeds produce seeds in the unconscious receptacle that mature later either in this life or in a subsequent rebirth. The existence of karma is a core belief in Buddhism, as with all major Indian religions. It implies neither fatalism nor that everything that happens to a person is caused by karma. A central aspect of Buddhist theory of karma is that intent matters and essential to bring about a consequence, a phala, fruit, or vipaka, result. However, good or bad karma accumulates even if there is no physical action, and just having ill or good thoughts create karmic seeds. Thus, actions of body, speech or mind all lead to karmic seeds. In the Buddhist traditions, life aspects affected by the law of karma in past and current births of a being include form of rebirth, realm of rebirth, social class, character and major circumstances of a lifetime. It operates like the laws of physics, without external intervention, on every being in all 6 realms of existence including human beings and gods. A notable aspect of the karma theory in Buddhism is merit transfer. A person accumulates merit not only through intentions and ethical living, but also is able to gain merit from others by exchanging goods and services, such as through dana. Further, a person can transfer one's own good karma to living family members and ancestors. Liberation nirvana has been the primary and the soteriological goal of the Buddhist path for monastic life. Since the time of the Buddha, the term path is usually taken to mean the Noble Eightfold Path, but other versions of the path can also be found in the Nikayas. For example, in some Pali canons, the Buddha explains that the cultivation of the Noble Eightfold Path by a learner monk leads to the development of 2 further paths of the Arhats, which are right knowledge or insight, and right liberation or release. Nirvana literally means blowing out, quenching, becoming extinguished. In early Buddhist texts, it is the state of awakening that leads to the blowing out and the ending of the cycles of sufferings associated with rebirths and rebirths. Many later Buddhist texts describe nirvana as identical with anatta, with complete emptiness, nothingness. In some texts, the state is described with greater detail, such as passing through the gate of emptiness, realizing that there is no soul or self in any living being, then passing through the gate of signlessness, realizing that nirvana cannot be perceived, and finally passing through the gate of wishlessness, realizing that nirvana is the state of not even wishing for nirvana. The nirvana stage has been described in Buddhist texts partly in a manner similar to other Indian religions as the state of complete liberation, enlightenment, highest happiness, bliss, fearless freedom, permanence, non-dependent origination, unfathomable, indescribable. It has also been described in part differently, as a state of spiritual release marked by emptiness and realization of non-self, while Buddhism considers the liberation from samsara as the ultimate spiritual goal. In traditional practice, the primary focus of the vast majority of lay Buddhists has been to seek and accumulate merit through good deeds, donations to monks and various Buddhist rituals in order to gain better rebirths rather than nirvana.